Good morning. It is my honor to join you here this morning for the 2011 Memorial Day observance, and alongside so many that have served our nation and our communities, and still more that do so this very day. It is also my great honor to represent the 4,600 men and women of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department and all of our allied law enforcement partners. Our Sheriff's Department takes its place on the front lines of Homeland Security in making our local communities safe every day alongside more than 800,000 full-time peace officers spread among 18,000 state, county, and city law enforcement agencies across the United States. This is the day each year that we set aside since the end of World War I to recognize now over 1.8 million Americans killed in our nation's wars since 1775. This day also serves as a stark reminder of the transcendent sacrifices made by those who stood silent vigil over us day or night, temperate or inclement weather, and more often than not, very far from home and away from any comforts that the rest of us normally take for granted. It is also a very vivid reminder of the mortal danger our young men and women in uniform still face serving our nation and our communities on her front lines. These men and women that we honor this Memorial Day were stripped from this world suddenly, violently, in a very untimely fashion, for reasons known only but to God, but in defense of our nation and all that it represents in the world. Theirs is a vivid reminder of the sacrifices made by those serving past, present, and future who stand over us in professions that place them frequently in mortal peril. Now, after nearly 4 decades of wearing the uniforms of our armed forces and that of local law enforcement at both city and county level, I can clearly point out a number of similarities in the values that those uniformed services all share. I've had the honor to wear the uniform of my country as an Army officer and 2 different law enforcement uniforms as a servant of our communities. Those sets of uniforms have defined all of my adult life, just as they defined many of yours here gathered. Those uniforms underscore our values and bond us together, not only in the profession of arms, but in law enforcement and fire services, and they underscore our personal sense of responsibility to our communities, to others that have served, and more importantly, to those who have fallen before us to give us a better world and safer communities. Whether you've worn the uniform or not, we all respect the symbol of wearing those uniforms and the values that they represent. Those very values talk to what we stand for, and they signal our individual and our collective character as a free society. In my comments this morning, I touch upon those common values that we all value so dearly as a free society by those who wear the uniform to protect our nation and our communities, and the high costs of wearing those uniforms to every single one of us. Indeed, on 9/11, the incident that now has framed nearly a decade of foreign wars, 72 law enforcement officers were felled in that single terrorist attack on Twin Towers, making it, in our United States history, the single deadliest day in U.S. law enforcement history. They were also joined by 343 firefighters and paramedics killed in that same incident. Since that date, now over nearly a decade, nearly 2,000 law enforcement officers have been killed in the line of duty over this past decade. Ours, the military profession of arms, the law enforcement, and the fire services are all noble professions and noble callings. Some of the very few where duty and responsibility on behalf of our nation and our communities, and really, if you think about it, on behalf of perfect strangers to each of us, can cause the very sacrifice of our lives. These are not really just jobs. They are what we term callings. There are a few callings in life where the values are so lofty, the profession so noble, the duty so profound, and yet the sacrifice to all of us is so very, very great. Those we honor today quite literally gave their all, or as Lincoln so eloquently put it, their last full measure. It is that constant threat of mortal danger that lurks ever present that focuses military, fire, and law enforcement services on the values that all of us here gathered today can underscore in the uniformed services: selfless service, sense of duty, loyalty to others, trust, honesty and integrity, teamwork, self-discipline, and of course, patriotism. These are values that are often shied away by the rest of society, from whom those in uniform are often called to protect and serve by our sworn oaths in those services to our Constitution, and more importantly, that have kept us so free. But that profound sacrifice I mentioned earlier is part and parcel as to why we come here today, to remind ourselves of what our country stands for. And more importantly, it is that continued willingness to sacrifice that has kept our nation in the very leadership forefront of the world. In our nation's communities, another deadly struggle also occurs that we cannot lose sight of. And that sacrifice is similar to that of our armed forces, all driven by these very same values. The young men and women serving on our community's front lines are also perishing, not abroad, but right here at home by violent acts. Each year, officers within Riverside County and across our nation are subjected to over 60,000 assaults in the course of their duties that our communities have tasked them with. Over 16,000 officers each year sustain injuries as a result of those assaults. One officer is killed in the United States every 53 hours. In 2010, just this past year, we had 152 officers felled in the line of duty, a huge increase over the previous year. So far this year, in 2011, we're at 77 as of today, a 13% jump over the same time period this past year. 34 of those this year have been felled by gunfire, not abroad, but on our nation's streets. Indeed, 59 of our very own, since Riverside County was created in 1893, have died in the line of duty. This represents all agencies that serve in Riverside County, federal, state, county, and city. I think all of us will agree that is a terrible, terrible price that we have collectively paid. But here's why I underscore these numbers on this Memorial Day. Many of those officers killed in the line of duty over the last decade have served on active military duty in war zones or were still serving today as reservists, some completing multiple deployments in our war theaters. Many, only to return home, donned their other uniform of selfless service, then perished on our local streets and on those front lines. Not on some faraway battlefield, but here at home, still protecting us, still underscoring those values that we revere as our purpose here today. These young men and women are in reality twice the citizens. And we are very lucky to have a generation forged by wartime over the last decade, now nearing almost this next fall will be 10 years exactly since that original incident that sent us off on this course. And they're still committed to serving their communities, protecting our freedoms, patrolling our streets, guarding our jails, securing our courtrooms, and conducting coroner public administrator operations. We all here today also owe these citizen soldiers and their families a very special debt for their sacrifice. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department has several hundred military reservists alone within our ranks. During the periods after 2001, at one point, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department had nearly 150 of its members federally activated as reservists in all branches of the armed forces. Many of our reservists have now seen multiple deployments with their units. This very day that we're gathered here at Riverside National Cemetery, we have 34 members deployed all over the world. Riverside County does everything it can to support our reservists. Their military service makes them better officers and deputies, and it makes our organizations better agencies in serving all of you, and it makes our communities better. We are lucky to have such personnel, those that serve twice, and we honor their commitment to the values that bind the military profession of arms to the uniformed law enforcement and fire services. But most importantly, I wanted to underscore today that many rest right here where we're gathered, and they have sacrificed in a variety of ways at home and abroad. Some fell on battlefields far away, some much closer to home after surviving on those foreign battlefields, but fell locally, once again protecting us, wearing another uniform. They are bound together by duty and selfless service and their oath to the Constitution. And I'm thinking right now of recently fallen Officer Jermaine Gibson of the Cathedral City Police Department, and also Officer Ryan Bonaminio, Riverside Police Department, killed on our streets in November 2010, both buried here. Thank you for honoring those who have kept our nation free and whose sacrifice must be honored and remembered by the celebration of their lives and what they all stood for. It has been my honor to be with you here today in tribute to those that have fallen. God bless those serving on our nation's front lines. God bless our great country. We have all paid a very high price, and we must each cherish that sacrifice such that it has not been in vain. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.